Hi, this is Michael Paul with New Orleans Scottish Rite College. I wanted to do a video today answering an email we received, and the brother writes, in your video on lodges, you suggested manner of dress and conduct in your lodge. Can you offer tips on clothing and conduct when visiting other lodges? We can do that. The thing we'd want to do first is identify when you say clothing. There's two areas of clothing that we can mean when we talk about masonry. One is the clothing that you're wearing, your shirt, pants, whatever, and the other would be clothing as in the apron and how you should clothe yourself as a mason. And I think there's an area we can get into with this first. Obviously, the degree that you're in, that you hold, whether you're a master mason and an apprentice fellow craft, you'll wear your apron differently for each degree. Contact your lodge if you are not a master mason and you have any questions about how your apron should be worn. Someone in your lodge, your instructor or master of the lodge, will help you to show you how to wear your apron in your lodge or when you are visiting a company with someone. Other than that, there are two specific ways that I've seen aprons worn in U.S. Masonry, and they're distinctly different, and it's not exactly how the apron but how the jacket is worn. In Louisiana, under the jurisdiction of Grand Lodge of Louisiana, the custom is that you wear the apron on the outside of the jacket. You put your jacket on and then you put your apron on top of that. And if you do not do that, and there's a district grand lecturer nearby, he'll probably correct you and tell you to change the apron, put your apron on the outside. And the reason is, or so I believe, is that you don't want anything to cover up the apron. A lot of times you wear the apron underneath the jacket and you wear the jacket over it. It'll cover up the apron. You can't see the apron and may believe that you don't have an apron on. In other jurisdictions, however, Virginia for one, I remember moving up to Virginia, and the first lodge I visited, I wore my apron as I did in Louisiana on the outside the jacket, and I was corrected immediately. They said, no, you have to put your apron on the inside the jacket. And it was completely opposite than Louisiana. And what I believe is that we go back to 1800s or so. It was more for fashion than for any esoteric reason. And the jackets, if you think back and see some of the old images and drawings and such, a lot of the jackets were short. And so when you put a jacket over an apron, it would still be underneath it and it would be showing it. I imagine the Masons at that time liked the way the aprons looked underneath the jacket. If you tried to put it over the jacket, sitting down, standing up, it may work its way out and end up that way anyway. And in addition, if you notice some of the old aprons, you may see old aprons from the 1700s, 1800s. Instead of aprons today being squared, you'll see a number of these aprons having rounded corners. And I would believe that this is the same way, the same thing, that there was a desire for fashion. And the aprons simply look better to them with curved, worn with their short jackets on top. Now, if we talk about clothing that we might want to wear when we're visiting a lodge, I imagine the best way to look at it, or to begin with, is to look at the lodge atmosphere itself and what we understand by the meaning or relationship we have with first our lodge and then other lodges. Now, we use in Masonry the term brother to identify another Mason. And that should give us a clue as to the relationship that we have, which would be a very close, a family relationship. And what we might do is think of a lodge as something as our own home, and the Masons that are in our own lodge as family members. Now, family members have certain liberties and privileges that are pretty much given. For example, in my own home, 8, 9 o'clock in the evening, if I feel a little hungry, I would think nothing of going into the kitchen and fixing myself a sandwich or going into the refrigerator and grabbing a little snack. The same would be true for my sons or my wife. This is just something, if we felt hungry, we just go and do it. We don't have to ask permission to do this, we just go. As long as what we're taking is not something that was needed for a meal later on, there's usually no problem, and this is part of the privilege of being in the family. On the other hand, there's no way in the world that I would consider getting hungry around 8, 9 o'clock and then walking over to my neighbor's house without asking and going into their refrigerator and fixing myself a snack. That would be an abuse of privilege. I would expect them to be upset, just as I would be upset if someone, without asking, walked into our house and helped themselves to some food or something that we would consider out of bounds. There's certain things that you do and you don't do in relationship with others, and there's levels of relationships. You may be very good friends with a neighbor, but that doesn't mean that the neighbor has the same privileges most of the time as in your house. And just the fact that privileges may exist between other people doesn't mean that it would exist between everyone. And if we look at that way, we might understand that things that we might do in our lodge might be stepping over a line or crossing a line if we did these in another lodge when we're visiting. Another example that you might look at is if you're in your own lodge and there's a motion to buy something, and you discuss it, the members of the lodge discuss it, and if there's a visitor to the lodge, if the visitor stood up and began arguing one way or the other for something that was really a private matter for the lodge, that would be a little bit out of bounds. It would not be exactly proper. And the same thing, of course, would be when a vote was called. A vote for the lodge is open for the members. If someone who does not belong to the lodge voted one way or the other, that's not his privilege. That's the privilege for the lodge members to do. And it's the same thing when you go from one jurisdiction to another. Unless you know exactly what you're walking into, then you want to assume that the things that you do cannot in any way reflect poorly on first Masonry, yourself, and especially your jurisdiction or your lodge. You want to conduct yourself in a proper manner, and how you do that is going to depend a lot on what you know about your own jurisdiction and the jurisdiction that you're following. In the other videos, we've discussed different types of lodges. For example, if you belong to a lodge that is minimalistic, in other words, when I say that, lodge members show up in blue jeans and casual clothing, and there's not much formality, and you go on vacation and you just see a lodge down the road, you have to understand that not all lodges are the same. Some lodges are formal, some lodges are not formal, some lodges are in between. And how you dress means something and says something. And if you would go to a lodge which is more formal and go in blue jeans, and especially if you're from a different jurisdiction, that might reflect poorly on your entire jurisdiction. The lodge members might, maybe if they're polite, they wouldn't say much, but you would be out of place. And this is something that you want to try to avoid doing, is giving any appearance of showing any sort of disrespect to the lodge that you're visiting. And that's the basic rule, is that when you go somewhere, you're going into another person's house. You want to conduct yourself properly. You don't want to demand things. You don't want to be that they will cater to you. You will cater to them. So if we look at this, if you are visiting a lodge and it's a local lodge, what I would suggest doing is try to find out a little bit about the nature of the lodge. If you are one who prefers not to wear a coat and tie, find out a little bit about this lodge. Ask, how do your members dress? If you know, then go ahead and visit. In all cases, act respectfully. Do not interfere with lodge business, personal business. If you're asked a question, if you happen to be a plumber and there's some plumbing problem and someone asks you, you give your opinion. Refrain from assuming any position of leadership. The exception, of course, would be if you're a Grand Lodge officer on business, then you have business to do there. But if you're just a regular visitor, don't assume things. Assume only to be there to enjoy the atmosphere, the fellowship. If you're visiting another jurisdiction, take a few extra steps. First thing, make sure you have your dues card with you. If you're visiting another jurisdiction and you've never been to this lodge before, of course the first step is to find out the jurisdiction of the lodge. Make sure that your Grand Lodge is in fraternal relations with the lodge you're going to visit. Nothing is more embarrassing than showing up at a lodge and finding out that there's no fraternal relations between your jurisdictions. You'd want to avoid this if at all possible. When you go to a lodge and you show up at a lodge and you cannot contact anyone in advance to say, hey, I'm coming, do whatever you can to dress up. It would be better that you have a coat and tie on and show up at a lodge that's a minimalistic lodge than the reverse be the case. When you go to the lodge, do not assume things. If you are a past master, lots of lodges have two sets of boxes with aprons in them. One is plain white aprons, the other is past master's aprons. Some jurisdictions, you are a past master only if you are an actual past master in that lodge. Being a past master from another jurisdiction, you are a past master, but it's not necessary to go and grab and let everyone else know. Go for the white apron. All Masons are brothers. We can afford titles and other accolades in other places. When you go to visit a lodge, don't assume things, don't claim things that unless you're sure that this is acceptable and you're not causing offense. Be respectful of the lodge. Always recognize that in different lodges they have different procedures for visitors. If you're tried, go along with that. You, of course, you know you don't have the right to go into a lodge where no one knows you on your word. Prove that you are a Mason. One particular thing: if you are asked for your dues card to be tried, it is not only proper but expected that you will ask them for their dues card at the same time, so that you show your dues card, they show their dues card, then you proceed with the trial. When you go into the lodge, sometimes lodges recognize visitors, sometimes they ask them to stand up, sometimes they'll ask them to say a few words. Expect this in advance. If it doesn't happen, you don't have to worry about it. But expect that you may be asked to say a few words. And it is sometimes considered disrespectful to, do you have anything to say, brother so-and-so? No, I don't have anything. And sit down. You'd want to extend a few words, compliments to the lodge. I appreciate you being here. I enjoyed the dinner. It was very good. I enjoyed being here. This is my first time in this lodge or this city. I've enjoyed. Give a few compliments to the lodge. That is what should be done, and it is what is respectful for anyone who's coming into a lodge or receiving a visitor. Don't ever get caught in any arguments in a lodge. If there is something being argued no matter what it is, you want to stay out of it. Do not involve yourself in any drama that may happen in a lodge. Do not involve yourself in any debate on finances that are going on in a lodge. Do not involve yourself in any debate of any sort of personal nature that's going on in the lodge. If you are a visitor, that's the lodge's business. You should sit there and be silent while they settle whatever business matters they have to settle. In all cases, go to a lodge and visit, enjoy everything that you see. Pay respects to the master, pay respects to the lodges. Bring yourself in a manner that when you leave, the next meeting they may talk about you in a very positive way. And that's the way that visitation should take place, in my opinion. I appreciate your viewing. If you have any questions, please notate them in the bottom or send them an email. Please like the channel and subscribe, and talk to you later.